Let me then introduce our next discussion. We're going to be looking at catalysts of culture. And this is really around how we go about achieving gender equity and equality. We know that it's something that requires a collective effort. But we're now going to be speaking to women who literally shape and have a voice and have used their own journeys to craft a message within the media landscape. They are people that are mobilizers, maybe even not intentionally so. Sometimes just by speaking and being true to yourself, you become a mobilizer. So these women are mobilizers of both online, offline communities, and I think they're women that we all really know very well. Let me invite onto stage, in no particular order, Ms. Rusera Seethel. She's Artistic Director of the Multidisciplinary National Arts Festival. Please give her a warm round of applause as she comes up. Ms. Nomsa Chabedi, Group CEO at the SABC. And last but absolutely not least, does she need an introduction? Let me please welcome on stage Caster Semenya. Wonderful. You see, you've hidden yourself so nicely there in the front, Caster. Nobody even noticed you were here. You kept a low profile very, very well. So I want us first just to begin by reflecting on what we mean when we talk about catalysts of culture. Because sometimes just by being, you are helping influence society in a particular way. And the media is very important in that sense because when you are either profiled in the media or you work in the media, you automatically have a microphone. You have a speaker that nobody else has. You have an audience that nobody else has. So I want to hear from each of you. Can you share an example with me of when you have seen or you have personally experienced bias in the media, how you have handled it, and how it made you feel? Rusera, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to be here and to join this really lovely panel. I think I maybe a bit in your introduction, a bit launched into a media space, not necessarily planning to step into it in that way. I want to share something that had quite a profound effect on me, which was at the moment of, I suppose, being launched into a public space, where what I faced was an overwhelming, in terms of my constituency, so the artist community, facing issues of inequality and around accessibility to electricity, devices, connectivity, one of our speakers spoke about before. It was in 2020 when I started working at the National Arts Festival. That was my first entry point in January, and of course it was the time of COVID. And we, our team of management, all women, had to make a very quick and terrifying decision, in fact, to go online. And we announced this in the media. We said we're doing a digital festival, not actually knowing what that is, because we hadn't done that before. It hadn't been done. And it was, it stirred a lot of response. I know there was a series of conversations, one that stays with me. So this is really just stepping into this role. And there was a conversation around how the decision to go online is killing theatre. So a kind of a sharp entry point. But we went ahead as a National Arts Festival and we found a way to do it. The finding a way was actually about, what we did is we opened up that conversation to artists to ask them, how do you see yourself on this digital platform? What do you want to bring? And so we shaped the festival and how we support them in response. And it was really like I said, a terrifying way to start, but incredibly, it was so fulfilling. We had some real surprises. I know there was a young man, Tebogo Chelochi from Mahikeng in Northwest, who produced a 1-minute film with his cell phone just around his experiences of his environment and the impact of COVID-19 on his community. And that film went on to win an Ovation Award on our platform and tour internationally, UK, Europe, Brazil, India, Germany, France. So it was a real moment of the team pushing through and with some really beautiful responses and impact.
I guess pushing through in spite of the initial resistance or even criticism to whether it was a good decision in the first place.
Yes, yeah. I think, it was a crisis moment, and there's not a lot of opportunity for women to be in positions of power. And when you find yourself in that, you have to arrive ready. And in your introduction, you said, come with yourself. And I think the team did that. I think we understood what was at stake. There was an entire arts industry that was shut down at that point. And yeah, we did just push through with it, because that's what needed to be done.
Okay. Nomsa?
I think for me, the experience was when I was appointed to SABC. I mean, I wasn't naive about the role, the institution, the history. But I think I was so taken aback by just the media coverage and the storyline that was developed, So obviously you've got your traditional media that does their job, fact checks, etc. But then you look at the social platforms, and all of a sudden the person they were talking about is somebody I didn't know, So and I think from my perspective, I looked at how media plays a massive role in society in shaping perceptions and opinions. And the fact that some stranger out there had the power to determine how other people felt about you. So that for me was quite an eye-opener. And I think what it also did, it basically made me realize the importance and the responsibility I was about to walk into to head the SABC. If you think about it, it's the biggest media house in South Africa, and also in terms of the newsroom, it's the biggest newsroom on the African continent. So for me, that was an eye-opener. But I think what's important more than anything in these situations is about resilience and realizing that we are not always in charge of the storyline. And that's very critical. And then you have to remove yourself from the storyline and remember who you are, and remember that you don't control everything around you. And I think the world has changed, media has changed, and for me that was the one moment that was, that made it very clear to me in terms of just the role of media, the role of social media, and what it does to individuals.
What was one of the things that you heard or that you read being said about you that you thought, now this is a new low? I thought it had gone low, but this is just even beyond. I mean, the one that you picked up your phone and called your friend or whoever is close to you and you said, near man.
Yeah. So what made me uncomfortable is when they go after your children.
Yeah.
That for me was a new low.
Yeah.
It was when they went after my kids. And then I realized that you don't have a safe space. And I think that's what has been created. There's no safe space. And because my kids came back from school and said, what have you done? Because our friends are showing us all of this. And I said to them, stay off social media for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. So that's how we handled it. So for me, that was the low. I think, when we keep it amongst ourselves as adults, etc., it's still palatable. But I think when you go after young people, I think you take it a step too far.
Castor, you might have a reflection or two, I think. I don't know. On this issue, examples of when you have experienced or seen that bias and how it has made you feel.
Afternoon, everyone. with my story is a catastrophic one. It was a lot of controversy. With me, it's a lot of mixed emotions because you're 18 years of age. You just rise, from the dust, to the cities, and you have no experience, of life, no experience of media. You've never done any, interview in particular, but then you come in and people have, audacity to talk about you as if they know you. You understand? And obviously, with my situation, I had to go, under, gender testing, where now I have to prove that I'm a woman. And you come, from a society that has never questioned, your being. And then you are here in this world, and then, it's media print, it may be television, Then, I was not, active on, Instagram and, Facebook and those things. And for me, from that particular day, I had to learn how to contain myself and know the importance of my existence, because I knew that, okay, this thing is happening for a reason. Yes, they're talking a lot about me. They're talking as if they know what's going on, what has happened. But I think what I've learned about that is to learn how to be a human, learn how to feel, learn how to separate myself from things that I cannot control. And obviously, I can,
Relate.
relate to her where now, media now, take a turn where they go to my family, my siblings, my dad, their work, my colleagues, people that I train with, to ask if really is she a woman. And for me, it gave me a stand to say, look, you gotta be a voice. You gotta be, go out there, fight for what is right, because most of the young, women, in the global south are affected by the same, situation. And now I have to educate them how to deal, with the situation. Obviously, everything is on media, but how are you going to deal, with something that is every day out there? When you walk on the streets, you're being called, by names. And I think for me, it was about, humility, making sure that whoever is surrounded, me, I have to teach them how to deal with me as a human. Before you can say anything about me, asking me how am I feeling, how does that make me feel? But obviously it isolated me from being a normal human to be just silent, to watch the space. You wake up every day, you see yourself on the headlines, You walk out of the door, people are talking about you. And now it had to put me in a silent, mode where I have to just watch, the world, doing that. It was unfair because I had no say. People are just talking about me, But what about me? What about what I feel? What about what I think? But I think by then it was a platform of saying, look, there's a true reflection of it where, my leadership styles, they come in where now I learn, about, self-acceptance, self-love, loving the person I am. And then I wake up every day, I look at that mirror, I love that person. Those are the things that I think it teaches you. Thank you. As a person, but also it can create a monster in you because you don't see the good in media.
Yeah.
You understand? You don't see anything good about them. What you see, you're seeing an enemy. But in a way, I think what I can say is that people need to do their thorough research before they can even publicize. They can go out there, broadcast, because now they're just talking about me. Nah, she looks like a man, she walks like a man. Yes, I know. I'm bold, I have a deep voice, I have all those things. Those are my features. But the thing is, I embrace that. As a society, we need to learn how to embrace one another. I think for me, that's what it means for me. Authenticity is the best outfit that you can rock. Love yourself, love the person you are, but try to build the life of others, because you might not know, what other people are dealing, with these situations. As we speak now, I'm dealing with more than, 20 athletes that are facing same, situation that they can't speak out, they can't voice out, they don't know how to, deal with the situation. And you're trying by all means to educate them how to navigate, how to connect. But media was supposed to be building us, not destroying us. So the advice that I can give you would be like, look, do your thorough research, make sure everything that you talk about, build a human.
You know, Castor, you talk about the silence that you felt you had to go into and probably were forced to going into, right? Because you faced the highest level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
None of us have ever had our medical records interrogated by the world's top publications. So there are levels to which I think your experience is unique. And yet, in those moments of your silence, there was a lot that your position was also saying.
Yeah.
Because it was very clear that you were undefiant. And that's why there was continuous coverage. There was coverage because you're not shifting in your position, regardless of how much more was being thrown out there. And do you see that as having shaped culture and what you think that did for society and what it does even for athletes today who face the same scrutiny?
I think that was beautiful, strategic.
It really was. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. I had to give, people time to talk. And then when I'm ready to talk, I'll come in, get that platform, to talk about my experience, what I felt. But for me, that was a healing, a process, because now I have to deal with myself as a person. I have to sit down and then understand myself as a human, you understand? Yes, my medical records are there in public because they helped me, They've helped me to go out, reach out, to people who are in the same situations as mine. But what I can say is that in a positive way, in everything that you do, take your time, pay attention to what an idiot, say about you. Because if I'm going to retaliate from what they were saying, probably I could have not been here today. You understand? So I think for me, I had to learn to deal with the situation itself, to learn to deal with the media, how I respond to people. She can, attend to that. She can say it because she was just in front of me. We were sharing a sports house. We were, housemates. And I was just there, easy, what I would say, pretending as if everything is good. But you're going down the drain. You are in deep depression. But I think it was a platform for me, just to learn, to be me, for me, not for others. Because I think the mistake we make as human, we want to live for others. We are forgetting that, perception of you has got nothing to do with me. What matters the most is that I had to deal with them, in the sports house, for them to ask me if I'm okay. I'm good. Deep down, I know I'm not okay. I know I'm hurt. I know it does not feel good to be labeled. But in other way around, I had to just, be me for me, love myself, but also to separate myself from my family, from my peers, to deal with the devil I am at that particular time. And it was good. It was open platform. Brand awareness is good. I'm a good brand. Stories. So I would say I appreciate what the world has done, for me, to try to take me down, to try to make me look like something that I'm not, to try to fit in sports that, I couldn't fit in. But also, the doors that they've closed, it's okay because I can open others, you understand? So, and I made a joke about, the wall that is built, in America for Mexican. I say, you build it, you still find them in America. So those are the things that we as individuals, we have to, focus on things that we can control.
All right.
If something you cannot control, move away from it, Be you for you, not for others. And I think life will be beautiful. That's what we're doing at the moment, trying to make sure that the youth, understand their worth, understand their existence, why they are here in this world. And also media, we're talking about that. They need to understand that media is a platform to reach out, to connect. But obviously, it will break you because anything that you do, people do not like. It will spite you. But you're not money. You cannot be loved by everyone.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. Thank you for those insights there. Nomsa, we are having a conversation around the media as just this one big homogeneous group, right? And yet we know that the media is, we can talk about legacy media, people like myself that are in the media. When you say the media is bad, I'm like, no, we fact check. But the reality is that we've moved into an age where there's a conflation between legacy media and new media. And legacy media hasn't done itself any favors either, right? So when we talk about new media, we're talking about social media, podcasting, all of the stuff that you love now and where you also have content available. Do you think that people actually make a distinction between the two? And do you think people should make a distinction between the two? Does it matter? Or do the lessons apply across the board?
So I think some people make a distinction and some don't. But the reality is that there is a massive distinction between the two. So if you look, for example, at public service media, there are guardrails in place that govern public service media. If you look at South Africa, you've got ICASA as a regulator, that you have to ensure that you adhere to your ICASA licensing frameworks in order to be able to continue. And then if you, the SABC, for example, you've got the Electronic Broadcast Act, but you also have the SABC Charter that really has a policy that's all about, universal access and ensuring that the SABC truly serves a public media service, which is all about plurality of voices, ensuring that the people who don't have access to platforms so that they can be heard. So that's the one part that you've got. And in that environment, you've got the fact-checking, you've got the quality journalism, and there's just that the issue of trust becomes very important. Because once that trust gets eroded, the whole idea of you being very critical in ensuring that South Africa's democracy is protected, then it gets eroded. And then you've got the other side, which is social media, which is very important in our society because with the penetration of internet and smartphones, social media has grown phenomenally in South Africa. And if you want to talk to young people, that's where they are. Media consumption has totally changed. So you can't say people only watch, TV on TV. That's why we've even changed. We don't say TV, we say video entertainment. Because, people really believe if they're on their phone, it's not TV. So the difference between the two, I always sit back and I think it's interesting how we trust people we don't know. There was a time where we trusted institutions, So you used to know that this is an institution and therefore there is some level of authenticity and credibility that they bring to society. But what has happened is that we live in a world where everybody's trying to break news, for example. And the newsroom, for me, is a very good example, whereby if you are sitting and you're at SABC, you really have to fact check and ensure that whatever you're going to break with is true. So you'd rather be late rather than rush and find out it's wrong. But on the other side, there is no fact checking. And we live in a world of misinformation and disinformation where truth is very questionable. They talk about post-truth. What is the truth? So that's really what has happened on the other side. So therefore, we must really differentiate between the two because from a social media perspective, there are no guardrails. Anything goes. And what has happened as well is that, it's content by an algorithm. So what has happened is everybody, they know what your interests are. They've seen where you've gone. And they serve you the content that is based on what the machine learning has taught them. But the danger with that is that you never ever come across different perspectives. And that's really what it does, in a sense that it makes you believe what you believe, because that's all that you deal with on a daily basis. Where on the other side, if you look at public service media, you are then forced to confront views that are totally different from yours. you know, and I'm not saying it's 100%, because the other side happens as well, where even in that environment, you do have the biases that come across. So for example, if I say to you, the poor, there's a picture that comes into your mind. You know, already there's a bias. The minute you've already imagined what the poor look like. And they're usually black, by the way. When I say crime, it's a black man. You know, that's the reality. So that there's also that bias, that inbuilt bias that exists there. And therefore, the importance of that is that then how do we balance that out? And I always say the other challenge you've got is people don't differentiate between my opinion and news. So what tends to happen is that if you look at some print media, for example, a lot of what goes on there is people's personal opinions.
Yeah.
But there are people who read it and actually think it's news, but it's not. It's my thoughts about Caster Semenya. But it's not necessarily the truth to a certain extent. It's how I feel, my experience, my socialization, that what's come through. So I think in a world where, you know, there's so much disruption that is taking place, yes, you must differentiate between the two, but legacy broadcasters have to ensure that they're sustainable for the future. So they also have to play in that social space. You know, so for one of the massive things I always say, if you look at, for example, sport, it's a multi-platform environment. One of the greatest presence for sport is actually SABC Sport on social media. And that's a very interesting part, because that's a legacy brand. But it is massive on social media, because that's where the engagement is taking place for the type of content that is being produced. So for me, that is really the differentiator, in a sense that, yes, the legacy broadcasters, legacy print are still there. But the reality is that the consumer of the future does not differentiate. What they see is content.
Yeah.
That's it at the end of the day. And the importance is that how do you then position yourself and ensure that you have that inbuilt trust and you can hold up to scrutiny when it comes to the content that you are feeding society.
Rosera, Nomsa makes an important point around the echo chambers that now the technologies that we live with every day are basically creating. So the content you're being fed, the ideas, it's helping to plant and stimulate. And I'm just thinking about how then we begin to push back, reshape narratives. Caster makes an example. She says, I didn't fit into any box that they wanted me to fit into. And I think that's powerful, because for mainstream media, the point is to say, how do we identify you? Where do we put you? You're either skinny or fat. You're either light-skinned or dark-skinned. There's no in between. And the reason why social media and new media has been so popular and people resonate with it is because it is an expression of what has been labeled the other. It is an expression of something that has not necessarily always been accommodated in mainstream media. So how do we then, as individuals, begin to recognize the power of our voices in that regard and see that we are able to push back when it comes to these narratives and reshaping that culture in that way?
I mean, Nomsa used a very important word or phrase speaking about the plurality of voices, and that's really fundamental and very important. And you know, if we zoom out a bit, really an unbiased media space, an unbiased social media space, these are things that we're negotiating constantly, and you know, it's a push and a pull, but what we can do is contribute our voices. And I think, you know, if one looks at the art sector and artist communities, this is really the realm that artists live and work in, and the importance, I think, of really protecting these spaces and supporting artistic voice. You know, I had actually last year at our festival, we had a discussion panel on post-truth. And it was very interesting. We had Kyle Findlay, who is the director of an organization called Murmur Intelligence, and they really look at our at social media landscape. So South Africa, but also other parts of the world. And he did a presentation at that time, and it was really just after our elections, of what our social media landscape looked like over that period. And you know, what he was sharing is that currently we are actually in quite a healthy space when we look at the overall. He had really beautiful infographics that really captured this very dynamic information. But what we do have in South Africa is we have robust dialogue. We have many voices, and we, you know, what he was showing is that if you look at an unhealthy social media environment, what you see is a kind of minimizing of topics and a few voices. And so, you know, it's a difficult space to be in social media. It moves so fast, but it is important to bring yourself and to bring your references. I think earlier on in panels we spoke about what is feeding artificial intelligence. What is the information that's going into that? And so we do have we have a lack of voices from the global south. We have a lack of voices from women. And so I think it's just really important to participate and to continue to participate and bring your values and bring your ethics, bring your voice into the room.
Okay, we're going to wrap this conversation up because we are out of time. Maybe let me just give each of you an opportunity to give a parting shot to everybody that is in the room, who I'm sure in their own way feels the pressure from time to time of being on social media, of being out there, having people say all sorts of things about you. Advice, what's your best advice on how we navigate but also influence culture? And one of the best examples I can think of is the journey of black women and black women's hair, right? We have had this incredible evolution. We've moved from a time where black women having natural hair was something that seemed to be frowned upon in the media. And today, when you look at the way in which black women have owned themselves and have owned their space, they walk into boardrooms with dreadlocks, and it's no longer, please go and cut your hair, or please do something about your hair. And that is, it might seem small, but it is incredibly dynamic. And that came out of the steps and the actions of everyday women who said, actually, enough and no more. So, Caster, let me give you a chance to go for it first. Very briefly for me, please.
Yeah. No, I think for me, what you see is what you get. Stay true to yourself, follow your path. Just be yourself, for you, because at the end of the day, it's about you. It's about your happiness, within. Have that best relationship with yourself. Understand yourself before anybody can understand you. Because at the end of the day, yes, I'll go out there, try to please, you, but am I pleased? Am I enough with myself? So I think for me, simple as that, as much as I said, authenticity is the best outfit that you can rock. I think each and every individual should go out there today, go back and ask yourself those questions. If you are fulfilled, are you satisfied with yourself? Are you enough, for you, before you can be enough for anyone? So I think that's the best way you can, rock, yourself out there, and do your best as you can be. I'll say just be the best that you can be, and be, that light and a symbol of hope.
Sure. Personal DMC. So much wisdom. DMC, deep, meaningful conversations. For the front row, I'm looking at the front. I'm teasing. Sis Namsa.
So for me, I think what's important is that everybody's voice matters. I think because the danger we have in society is that the dominant voices are the ones that determine the future. And they are allowed then to determine the narrative of society, of an entire nation. I mean, look at the polarized society we live in and what's happening across the pond, And it's a scary thought if you really think about it. And therefore, everybody, all of us in this room, and I think also as women, our voices matter. And we have to be visible, I think, in society. We have to be visible online. We have to be visible on social media. Because the reality, to your point, is that what feeds the algorithm is the people who are engaging with it. And if we are absent, the algorithm will go ahead without us anyway, So for us, what's important is that we must ensure that we take that space and we form our communities, we form our online communities, that we are not overlooked when it comes to, determining the future of nations, the future of our society. Because I think as women, to your point, when you're a black woman, I made an example, and I said, I was recently in Morocco, and when I walked into the room, everybody thought I was someone's wife. No one thought I was a CEO of a broadcaster. And I said, that was interesting to me, because when I walk into a room in South Africa, no one thinks I'm someone's wife. And that's the progress that this country has undergone.
Yeah.
So I think as a collective, let us use these platforms to get our voices heard.
All right. Rusera?
I think, look, we have to support our storytellers. And coming from the arts, I have to say, I really encourage everyone to make connections with artistic programming or artists who are working around you. And, artists, you don't often choose to be an artist because you want it as your job. It's more of a calling, And whether it's a musician or a poet, these are the people who hold our memory, who create work that generates empathy. And so I would say, I think we're echoing each other in different ways, but just to put an emphasis on that, let's support this plurality of voices and this storytelling, and make sure that you have regular connection points to your artistic community.
I love how you phrased it there. Looking at artists as people who hold our memory. Isn't that just beautiful? Or am I being too deep and meaningful right now? Please, let's give our panelists a warm round of applause. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much.